Hello and welcome to the AdTech Heroes podcast. In today's episode, we're going to talk about branding and performance from a global perspective. I'm delighted to be joined today by Louise Owen, who's the Chief Performance Officer at Hi, Louise. How's it going?
Good, and yourself?
Amazing. Thank you. Really good. Well, let's start from the beginning. Tell me more about your career. Where did you start off?
I guess engineering school. So I think this is maybe the oddity that I have within the industry is I actually have a background in civil and industrial engineering. So civil is how you build a bridge. Industrial is how you optimize things. You optimize building that bridge. Once I left school, I really asked myself what I really wanted to do because my skill set was really data analysis and insights. I actually discovered media planning and media buying through the search. So I was first a search trader at Viveki, which is kind of used to be part of Publicis. And then from there, once I was just understood kind of mechanics of ROI, of bidding, of CPNs, I just thought to myself, well, why are we doing this? Like, what are the insights behind me, the brands asking me to do this, to optimize to this, not to this? And this is when I started kind of being more and more interested in performance planning and performance strategy, and almost now really looking at understanding holistic brand strategy to really guide every channel to completion and to success. So within my career, I then went to Group M, and then within Group M, I moved around a lot. I actually worked for them in the US, in Colombia, in Singapore, and in Australia before coming back to my hometown of Paris. And then London. So covered a lot of brands, covered a lot of roles, really got a holistic view of what it is to run a global brand, what it takes from a governance perspective, what it takes from a measurement perspective, what it takes from a legal and financial perspective, and kind of understanding all of that.
In terms of the different countries that you lived in and worked in, are there any kind of like key takeaways, would you say, or in terms of kind of like the working culture or something that you might have gained when you were out there?
Well, I think Colombia had a really good work-life balance. So really enjoyed that. Australia was an interesting one. I think it was very, very casual, sometimes possibly too much for my European flair. The French work culture is very efficient, but it comes with a lot of kind of pushing back on things. So when you convince someone to do something, it's usually well executed, but convincing them to get there is kind of what takes some time. So I was very lucky when I worked at Group M in Paris. I worked on IBM as an international account. So I still had very much that Anglo-Saxon work culture. And it wasn't so much of a shock for me to reintegrate French society.
Amazing. And dare I ask, which country was your favorite in terms of living in and working in?
I have to say France.
There you go. You stick to your roots, right?
It's mandated by nationality. So
amazing. Good to know. And your role now, what does it consist of? Would you say kind of like your day to day, any specific projects that you're working on in your role at
So I think it's kind of an interesting one because again, we said I'm the first chief performance officer at and the reason for that is that a lot of our clients at are actually more on branding and consideration goals. So not all of them actually have what we would call performance team that supports them. All of them obviously touch digital channels, they touch data, they touch tech. And what was missing at according to my peers, was kind of someone to kind of come and harness all this and explain to clients how to move their brands into digital maturity, regardless if they were doing performance or brand. So my day-to-day is a lot of, jumping in on client strategy, jumping in on planning strategies, meeting with partners, meeting with senior leaders at brands, a lot of new business. As I joke, it's about having 20 tabs open in your mind. Each one of them is one of your clients. So, but the wonderful thing is we have a large spread of industries, of brands, some are global, some are regional, some are local. So every day is a journey into consumer behaviors.
Amazing. And why do you think there was that need for a, chief performance officer role right now? Is it related to, do you think, the clients and how maybe the clients have changed over the years, or the demands and dynamics related to the client, or is it more specific to internal, would you say, and maybe a lack of kind of skills in certain areas?
No, because the skills exist within IPG media brands. We have Kinesso, which is a performance agency that's very much focused on specialty. What's missing is that the brands, and I think it's coming from kind of a financial pressure that they're getting on marketing budgets, brands are asked to demonstrate performance, to demonstrate, how they're driving business. And obviously, as we're looking to more above the line channels, like out of home, TV, cinema, experimental, we know that actually measurement of efficacy for these channels takes time. There's a decay time, and then, it's measured for MMNs or from other kind of larger econometric models. So brands are looking towards digital channels to kind of test what's working, what's not, and really kind of pivot and be agile and kind of deliver results to their financial stakeholders.
That makes sense. Can I mention in your role, you're still speaking to those internally that are focusing on the branding side, right? So how do you feel that brands can integrate the performance, which you kind of work on mostly, and your peers that work on the branding side? How can you work more together in a more unified approach, would you say?
I think there's so many things that unify us. There's audience, there's kind of, category landscapes. I think search is actually, kind of, we say that search is a visibility channel. If you're searching and somebody's searching for you, you have to be visible. So when you think about it that way, there's tons of actually overlapping opportunities for us to collaborate on strategy, on getting, what are we saying about, what's the target audience, what's the addressable audience, and what's the actual audience. So kind of that relationship between who you want your customer to be, who you can actually reach, and who's actually engaging with your brand. So I think we have, we are, and the way that IPG kind of works, and then we have this this core platform that powers everything we do, is allows called Interact. It allows us to kind of have all of our data in the one place, and then have each of the teams kind of come in at the strategic brief, at the planning level, at the audience level, and kind of given their collaborative ideas about what we should be doing. So it's become, I think, very much streamlined, and we know that the line between brand performance is really something that we actually made up. For our customers or for our audiences, any interaction is a brand interaction. Any touch point is actually an opportunity to engage with a brand. It doesn't really matter to them if it is, an inspiring ad or a kind of, series of social posts or just, a retargeting ad. It is still the brand talking to them directly. So when you think about that, you just, you kind of have to remember that you have to put that vision and that brand, how the consumer is engaging and interacting with the brand at the center of your planning, not necessarily how your budgets are split, how your team, how your skills are organized within your agency. And most importantly, this is a tricky one, how measurement is aligned to kind of larger goals like lifting awareness by 1 point or driving brand. What does that actually mean on the day-to-day measurement?
That makes sense. And I think on that, it's clear to say that collaboration is very important, right, in all aspects. But would you say also the tools that you have access to are also important to really analyze and delve deeper into that data?
They're essential. I think this is really where AdTech, sometimes misunderstood by more brand planners. It's understanding that, it is without some of, our tools, we wouldn't have the feedback loop that we get from events on the website or from, viewability or, even brand safety to some extent. We wouldn't be able to connect to the CDPs. We couldn't be able to kind of, look at different, optimize our buying between different buying models and DSPs. So I think this is sometimes taken a bit for granted. The divide between performance planners and comms planners is actually the source of data that they use to go to their planning. And really, there is kind of, whenever you're using YouGov, ComScore, TGI to kind of get those larger brand like audience insights, understanding how people are engaging, how people are consuming media, then looking how those actual segments are showing up online can really kind of help you actually refine your brand strategy and actually refine your segmentation to drive to more personalized brand interactions.
Interesting. And from your experience, how does the perception of ad tech operate, or what's the perception of ad tech in the different markets that you've worked across? Is it the same in France versus Colombia versus Australia, or does it differ?
So I think obviously the big factor is legislation, data and privacy legislations. So obviously some, as we're thinking about, leveraging whether it's first party data or, or declarative data or PII, it depends again on the market and what you can use. So I think that really changes your stack. And that makes it quite difficult for global brands to have a unified MarTech and AdTech stack. But then you have, you kind of have something like in Australia. Australia's like the perfect sandbox for testing for performance and cross-channel targeting. Because if you think about the kind of the demographics of it all, there's 27 million population, around 60% are in 5 different cities. The two largest, 60% of like the grocery retailer market is owned by two brands. They also are the largest advertisers in Australia. And the government is incredibly invested in surveying their population constantly. So all of this makes it that you really can know who your target audience is, your very fine segments, and test things. So for example, we would know at rush hour what type of person would be driving at what time, and we could actually coordinate radio with out of home digital. So as they were driving by the billboard, the radio ads would come on. Well, you'd have to time it. It's like things like that.
You then sometimes have unexpected consideration, like, for example, logistics. I worked on Dell back in 2022, and at the time, you could not sell a computer or a Dell computer in India that wasn't manufactured in India. So it really changes, how you do your supply chain management on even the logistical side, but then also how that plugs in into your backend stack. Because obviously, what are you offering on your site? On the e-commerce depends again with the location of the person. This is really where AdTech comes into play. We need to know if someone is in India or someone isn't in India, what actually is happening to them from an experience perspective, and also what could they be exposed to from an advertising perspective. So it's kind of thinking that it's just about legislative differences that actually should be making your ad tech, the changes to your ad tech stack country to country. There's actually a whole system behind it, speaking about logistics, speaking about supply chains, how trade is managed, really have an impact about how we're able to collect data and how we're able to use that data.
It's a great way to look at it, because I think when we think of ad tech in the different markets, and my role also is global. So, we look at it from, I suppose, one lens of all the acronyms, right? So the DSPs, the SSPs, the DMPs, or all the different acronyms there in the programmatic ecosystem. And you see it is the same players, right? Mentioned in Australia. So you'll have a Google there, you'll have Google in every market, but you'll then have the Magnites, the Pubmatics of this world, the Equities of this world. You see them, and then the trade desks, of course, as well. So they are more standardized across those markets. But it's interesting, your point of that probably is the case, but there's certain adaptations, right, to each market, and certain conditions are made for you to probably succeed in certain areas and maybe not succeed in certain areas.
Yeah, it also depends kind of what data sets they have access to, what inventory they have access to. For example, we have, Axiom was part of the IPG, which is kind of the data spine for identity resolutions for targeting. We can do the identity resolution to about, 99% of the UK population because we have so many data sources. We go to, a smaller market, like I think the Netherlands, or I'm thinking Poland, obviously we don't have completely that match rate there. We have to use other sources. We have partnerships, so we're still able to kind of build high value audiences, to do, kind of some of the research and insights work that we can do, but it's not, we can't just go to a client and saying, you're going to get the same thing everywhere.
Definitely. Going back to your earlier point about branding and performance and how they can work together. So do you have any examples where performance-driven insights have enhanced the branding outcomes?
One that comes to mind is always interesting when you have one brand that has multiple products with overlapping audiences. Because obviously you wouldn't know kind of, you can kind of guess your frequency and your reach kind of overlap with the tools, but really you don't actually know how the customer, your audience will be traveling between the different messages and if they make sense to them. When you go down to performance and you see actually how people are engaging with those different campaigns on those different products, where is the overlap, how they're acting on the site, you then get a better idea of your customer segmentation. And that can be pushed back up to kind of brand level targeting and saying, okay, well, we know that this demo actually responds better to this product. And then if they don't, we can pass down that campaign to another demo, or we just serve another product to the demo who passed on it. So I think that has really changed the way that brands kind of, within internally, like brands kind of look at their budgets. it's caused a lot of sources of budgets within an organization is always kind of fun to deal with because depending on global, regional, local sources of budgets, brands, product sources, that kind of gets all mixed up. And so when you're trying to explain to someone, if you have a keyword, I'll just take Dell again as an example, like, a desktop for work, is that for a consumer or is that for B2B? Or so you don't know. So you have overlap in budgets. So that keyword belong to either brand or you'd like to either the B2C side or the B2B side. It's arguably, the reality is that it has to be a budget that serves both. And we have to understand who in that interaction, what is the person searching trying to get to?
Interesting. I always thought of branding supporting performance and not so much performance supporting branding, but you're saying it can happen both way around.
Yeah, and we can just think about, DCO, for example. I think that's a really easy example to understand. That you can test things within the performance sandbox and then push them back up as larger campaigns. The brand side, I think another thing that really has kind of really enhanced the relationship between performance and brands is conversion APIs and enhanced conversions measurements, because again, then allows us to really deep dive into how people are interacting with the sites, how they're interacting with the brand, and go back to brand campaigns or the branding and saying, well, actually, you seem to have a stickiness on this content, or you seem to be kind of losing people when you're talking about this, or, this product's not working. That, wasn't necessarily was inferred by a lot of creative agencies on what the customer should be doing. But again, it's a reality on there's a difference between who your desired customer is and who your real customer is.
How do you feel about the knowledge of the clients when it comes to performance and branding? Does it differ? Do you think they understand more about how branding works or how performance works, or does it just really depend?
Well, because it is kind of different skill sets, as you would have think, some is about really kind of understanding maybe more behavioral insights. The other one is more about understanding signals and online touch points and how, and how how data is collected. They are different skill sets, even usually with our advertisers and with our clients. But unifying force is usually chief technology officer or the chief marketing officer. So them being able to kind of get them to align to what technology should be underpinning their marketing, where the gains are going to come from that is a very important conversations to have with them. And obviously, you have consultancies, you have Adobe, you have Google. Everybody wants to kind of have that conversation because they know that now these days you have to almost buy growth brands, and the markets are so saturated. So marketing has really become a lever for growth. It's a measurable lever, but we need to again have the right technology to measure it accurately.
It's a good point, and I think some clients have probably leaned in a little bit more than others, especially when it comes to ad tech. But how do you feel, with your experience, businesses within the industry can build an ad tech stack that aligns with their strategic goals?
This is a difficult question because there's two things. There's the shift, there's the changes in strategic goals that might happen at a faster pace that you would predict, depending on how the economy is going, how that industry is going. And then there's also the very fast-paced evolution of ad tech, of measurement solutions, of legislations. So kind of future-proofing your ad tech is kind of, it's not necessarily flying blind. I think that we've just kind of passed a point, with cookieless that has kind of, everybody tried to get ready. I think a lot of people got educated. So I think that was a good thing. Now the journey continues. What will be the next big disruptor beyond AI is yet to come. But again, that's one of the challenges is how do you actually get that 5-year, 10-year vision of what you should be implementing and the cost benefits that it's going to bring to your organization. Because ultimately, that's how you justify any technology investment.
Definitely. And I think it's important to highlight the role that ad tech plays in digitalizing existing channels. Like we saw, audio was an example. And, I was at Spotify in some of the early years around 2016, 2015, 2016, and, launching that on a digital scale across the market was a really exciting time. And now, of course, you've got CTV and you've got retail media, you've got Now, out of home, right, with digital out of home, really in the news, in the industry press now, doing really exciting campaigns, winning tons of awards. So there's all these channels. There's a lot of work being done on the ad tech front. And why do you think that's important in terms of having the different channels for brands to work across?
Oh, because again, I think journeys are no longer linear. As I've seen, some have been shortened. Some people don't actually need to consider different brands. They're fairly, they will just go off of their knowledge and their impression and their emotional connection to a brand directly to conversion. Some might actually really need to compare products to understand what the offerings are. Do they like the brand? Do they not like the brand? What the brand stands for? And that all takes, again, so this idea that, now we're just kind of going from awareness to consideration to conversions, it's very, very simplified. And we know this because we know we have what we call the messy middle, which is, really where basic brand and performance are meeting on what we would call consideration channels. But really, it's about understanding, actually, what are the real levers for growth? Is it brand awareness, or is it maybe, kind of brand visibility, which is something different? How do you align your channels behind that, if that's what's going to make your brand grow, versus just trying to lift brand awareness for a survey that will be done 6 months after you have a big TV campaign? Because yes, that would make sense. But is that really the one that's actually going to be driving revenue and sustainable revenue growth?
Interesting. And do you think there's a specific channel here that wins that race when it comes to blending performance and branding? Is there one channel that sticks out for you?
I think, it used to be social. Now it's going to be retail media. I think that's, because again, it will totally be, you'll be able to kind of match the physical with the emotional in that one touch point. It's still, it's a sort of kind of a nascent, I wouldn't say it's nascent, but it's a complicated space. It's a very fragmented space. I think companies are interested in, but wary again of how you measure success, how you avoid overlap, how you respect different data sets' privacy. Are they aware that, their data might be sold? Are they aware that, this is going to be used to target them or to build segments? There's tons of questions about this. And I think, whatever ad tech solution finds a way to actually easily kind of do identity resolution and measurement unification, and again, data unification, is definitely going to be in a very good position financially in the coming years.
Amazing. And what excites you most for the future? What excites you most about 2025 on, 2026 onwards? What's the, the most exciting part for you?
So I'd like to not say AI, but obviously has to be AI, but I think, AI is for creative and for kind of experience and for content has been kind of explained many times. There's obviously generative AI just for scaling the content that you created that you have, make it more personalized to your audience, then almost going to predictive models of what real-time, behavior, intent, emotional state of that person is to serve them the right ad. I think everybody can kind of guess this, but there's also this question of saying, like, although AI models need to be trained and they can work off different data sets, how does one brand really differentiate itself from a competitor? Because if they're working off of my signal, I'm still the same person. So where does brand kind of voice and differentiation go towards, if we're just personalizing everything to ourselves? So those are I'm very interested in seeing kind of how that happens. I think there's still a lot of work to do and kind of, again, like kind of training AIs for specific brands. The one thing I'm really excited about, and it's a very redundant theme, is AI for measurement. Finally having a system to finally customize the measurement model and measurement framework to the brand by analyzing all of the data points, and not actually the agency or the marketers or the analytics team try to retrofit it into an MMM, an FMM, different market, like, which is, how do we measure engagement? Like, is it clicks? Is it viewability? Is it, revisits? Like, we have these conversations for the last 10 years, even more. So I'm very happy that somebody else will be taking that on in this way in AI.
Amazing. I totally agree with you there. I think measurement and feeding those insights back to the brand needs to be bespoke, right, and customized. It shouldn't just be a template that's copied and pasted and a few numbers thrown in. I think there's a lot more that we need to do, not just agencies, but also the media owners and the vendors that work for the brands, right? So yeah, I totally agree with you there.
But again, I think that a lot of vendors and publishers are completely willing to find custom solutions to kind of look at, what measurement, what needs to be included, what needs to be excluded, what's important. But it's really about, the difficulty is within an organization. You have so many stakeholders that how should marketing be measured? And how should we know what's what are the expectations for it? So, we usually, again, like going back to this example of just saying that we have a framework for awareness, we have a framework for consideration, we have a framework for conversion. But behind this, what actually is driving growth? So, we have the MMMs that tell us how channels are kind of synergies, but it doesn't tell us why there's channel synergies. So I think these models will be looking at business outcomes, at campaign outcomes, at brand health outcomes, and looking at a more complex model to actually make sense of it against marketing activity. So I'm really excited for this. And then we can actually enhance it by actually having a clear idea of what we're actually targeting in performance.
Amazing. We always finish off our podcast episodes with this final question. I'd love to get your take on it. If you had a superpower in ad tech, what would it be?
I think you would be able to go back in time to like 2012 and convince, again, the CTO, CMO, Chief Legal Officer, and the Chief Financial Officer to all sit down and kind of agree on what they're going to be doing with their data and set a roadmap for data unification. Because what I've seen too much of, and this is again on the MarTech, on the ad tech, and even on the logistical tech side, is that they've created so many providers, so many solutions that now reconciling years and years of accrued data, this is very heavy lifting. So a lot of brands are missing out, on the ability to really understand, get these insights from their corporations, from their activities, from their marketing, from their audiences at scale. And CDP implementation is heavy lifting. If they had just kind of organized things ahead, and I'm not saying that they would have seen everything coming their way. They could just said, we're going to base the data lake, we're going to try to choose some data cubing and kind of clear everything cleanly. A lot of brands would be much further on digital maturity than they are today.
I think that's got to be my best answer to today, really, because, and the reason for that is everyone wants to know what the future has, and everyone wants to see into the future. But you did the complete opposite, and you said, I want to actually go into the past and already fix those things. So that's amazing.
I want to change the past because I think there is we focus so much on kind of, again, on what was new when, in the kind of like what was new technologies from targeting devices, channels, that we forgot that, again, unification of data and of signals is really what powers insights, and insights for planning, insights for strategy, and insights for performance. So that has always been the case. I think that's what my background has always taught me is that, you set a hypothesis, you collect data. First of all, you define what is data, you collect data, you analyze data, you build your scenarios, and then you choose your solution. But in order for that to happen, the data set has to be clean and it has to be unified.
Amazing. Love that answer. I think that's all we've got time for today in today's episode. Thank you, Louise, for your time. It was great speaking to you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me.